Picture this. You're hosting the perfect baby shower for your sister. Champagne flowing, elegant decorations, your closest friends and family gathered to celebrate new life. Then you glance through your kitchen window and see your husband's mouth on another woman's neck, your best friend's wife. The champagne glass slips from your hand, shattering against the marble floor, just like your 18-year marriage. But here's where it gets shocking. This isn't just any affair. This woman is wearing your missing anniversary necklace, the one your husband claimed he couldn't find. And when her 6-year-old daughter innocently mentions mommy's pretty new necklace from the nice man who isn't daddy, the entire baby shower explodes into the most dramatic confrontation you've ever witnessed. What happens when a respected CEO discovers her husband's betrayal in front of 25 witnesses? How far will desperate people go to cover their tracks? And why is there suddenly a pregnancy that changes everything? This is the story of Victoria Caldwell, a woman who thought she had the perfect life until one champagne glass shattered everything she believed about the people closest to her. Trust me, you won't see the twist coming in this tale of deception, revenge, and ultimate justice. Stick around because this story has more plot twists than a legal thriller, and the ending will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty and betrayal. The champagne glass slipped from Victoria Caldwell's hand as she watched her husband's mouth on Grace Sullivan's neck through the kitchen window. The crystal shattered against the marble floor, sending sparkling fragments across her perfectly polished tiles. Victoria stood frozen, staring at the destruction at her feet while her mind struggled to process what she'd just witnessed in her own backyard. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you all right?" Patricia Wilson, their longtime housekeeper, rushed into the kitchen with a concerned expression. At 52, Patricia had worked for the Caldwell family for 8 years and had developed an almost maternal instinct for trouble. "I'm fine," Victoria lied, forcing herself to look away from the window. "Just clumsy today, I suppose." Patricia began sweeping up the glass shards while Victoria's hands trembled slightly. She was 42 years old, the successful CEO of Caldwell Marketing, and she'd built what everyone considered the perfect life. Her husband Marcus was a prominent corporate lawyer. They lived in a stunning colonial home in the most exclusive neighborhood, and today they were hosting her sister Rebecca's baby shower. Everything was supposed to be perfect. "The caterers will arrive in 30 minutes, Patricia said gently, studying Victoria's pale complexion. "Should I handle the final preparations while you rest?" "No, thank you. I need to stay busy." Victoria forced a smile and glanced toward the window again. Marcus and Grace had separated, both looking around nervously as if they'd heard the glass break. "Is my husband still outside?" "Mr. Caldwell went to pick up the extra chairs from storage," Patricia replied. "That young woman from the restaurant is arranging the flowers on the patio tables." Grace Sullivan, 28 years old, beautiful in an effortless way that made Victoria feel ancient, and married to Dylan Sullivan, Victoria's best friend since college. Grace worked as a waitress at Chez Laurent, the upscale restaurant where Victoria's marketing firm held client dinners. When Rebecca had requested help with the baby shower catering, Victoria had naturally thought of Grace. Now she wondered if that had been her first mistake. The doorbell rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. Patricia moved to answer it, but Victoria waved her off. "I'll get it. The guests aren't supposed to arrive for another hour." Dylan Sullivan stood on the front porch, holding his 6-year-old daughter Emma's hand. His warm brown eyes crinkled with genuine affection when he saw Victoria, and guilt twisted in her stomach. Dylan was one of the kindest men she'd ever known, loyal, trusting, and completely devoted to his family. "Victoria, sorry we're early, but Emma was so excited about the party that she convinced me to stop torturing her with waiting." Dylan's construction company had done well enough that he could afford to take Saturday afternoons off, especially for family events. "Uncle Dylan," Emma broke free and hugged Victoria's legs. The little girl had been calling her aunt since she could talk, even though there was no blood relation. "Mommy said there's going to be cake." "There certainly is," Victoria managed, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Your mommy is out back. Sweetheart, why don't you go find her?" Emma skipped toward the backyard while Dylan stepped inside, immediately noticing something was wrong. After 15 years of friendship, he could read Victoria's moods better than most people. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just pre-party nerves. Victoria deflected. You know how I get about hosting? Dylan laughed. The woman who regularly presents marketing campaigns to Fortune 500 executives gets nervous about a baby shower. Come on, Vic. What's really going on? Before Victoria could answer, Marcus appeared in the doorway leading from the kitchen to the living room. Her husband of 18 years looked flushed, his normally perfect hair slightly mussed, and he was adjusting his tie with uncharacteristic nervousness. Dylan, good to see you. Buddy. Marcus's voice carried forced enthusiasm as he clapped his best friend on the shoulder. Thanks for coming to this estrogen festival. Wouldn't miss it. Rebecca's glowing with happiness, and Grace has been talking about this catering opportunity for weeks. Dylan's genuine warmth made Victoria's heart ache. She's so grateful that Victoria thought of her. Marcus and Victoria exchanged a brief glance that Dylan missed entirely. In that moment, Victoria saw something in her husband's eyes that chilled her, guilt mixed with calculation, as if he was measuring how much Dylan knew or suspected. Where did you disappear to earlier? Victoria asked Marcus carefully. I thought you were helping with setup. Had to run some errands. Last-minute wine run. You know how it is. Marcus's explanation came too quickly, too rehearsed. The good stuff for your sister's special day? Patricia reappeared with a dustpan full of glass shards. Mr. Caldwell, should I put these wine bottles you brought in the cellar with the others? Wine bottles? Victoria's eyebrows rose. I thought we already had enough wine. Can never have too much for a celebration, Marcus said, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Through the window, Victoria could see Grace arranging white roses in tall vases, her movements graceful and efficient. Emma had found her mother and was chattering excitedly, while Grace nodded and smiled. The picture looked innocent enough, but Victoria found herself studying Grace's body language with new suspicion. I should go help Grace finish the setup, Dylan said, oblivious to the undercurrents in the room. She was nervous about doing her first catering job for friends. Actually, Victoria said suddenly, could you help Marcus move some furniture instead? I'd like to talk to Grace about the service timeline. Marcus opened his mouth as if to object, then closed it. Dylan shrugged agreeably. Sure thing. What needs moving? As the men headed upstairs, Victoria walked toward the backyard, her heart pounding. She needed to see Grace's reaction when they spoke face to face. She needed to understand what she'd really witnessed through that window. Grace looked up as Victoria approached, and for just a moment, something flickered across her features. Fear, guilt. But it was gone so quickly that Victoria almost wondered if she'd imagined it. Mrs. Caldwell, the flowers look beautiful, don't they? I wanted everything to be perfect for your sister. Grace's voice carried its usual cheerful tone, but there was a slight tremor underneath. They're lovely. Grace, thank you for taking such care with the details. Victoria studied the younger woman's face carefully. You seem nervous. Is everything all right? Oh, you know, first time catering for friends instead of strangers. I want to make a good impression. Grace tucked a strand of honey-colored hair behind her ear, and Victoria noticed her hand was shaking slightly. I'm sure you'll do wonderfully. Marcus has certainly been singing your praises lately. Grace's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Has he? That's very kind of him. The response felt wrong somehow. Not the pleased surprise of someone receiving unexpected compliments, but the wariness of someone who'd been caught off guard. Emma ran up to them, interrupting the moment. Mommy, can I help carry the pretty glasses? Let's leave the breakable things to the adults. Sweetheart, Grace said quickly, scooping Emma into her arms. Why don't you go inside and see if Aunt Victoria has any special jobs for little helpers? As Grace carried Emma toward the house, Victoria noticed something that made her blood run cold. Grace was wearing earrings that Victoria recognized, distinctive gold and pearl drops that Dylan had bought for Grace's birthday last year. Victoria remembered because she'd helped him pick them out, but she was certain she'd seen one of those earrings on her bedroom dresser that morning. Victoria followed them inside, her mind racing. The first guest would arrive soon, and she needed to pull herself together. Rebecca deserved a beautiful celebration. Regardless of whatever was happening in Victoria's marriage, Jennifer Torres, Victoria's business partner and closest female friend, arrived precisely on time as always. At 40, Jennifer had the sharp instincts of a successful marketing executive and the loyalty of someone who'd helped build Caldwell Marketing from the ground up. Victoria, you look gorgeous, but also like you haven't slept in days. What's going on? Jennifer set down an elaborately wrapped gift and immediately focused on Victoria's face with concern. Nothing that can't wait until after the shower, Victoria deflected. Rebecca will be here any minute. Uh-huh. Jennifer's expression suggested she wasn't buying the deflection for a second. We're talking about this later. More guests began arriving. Rebecca's college friends, neighbors, colleagues from Marcus's law firm, and family members. Victoria slipped into her hostess role automatically, greeting everyone warmly and ensuring they had drinks and appetizers. But part of her mind remained focused on watching Marcus and Grace. They were being too careful to avoid each other. In a room full of people, most couples or friends would naturally gravitate toward familiar faces. Instead, Marcus and Grace seemed to have an invisible force field between them, never occupying the same conversation circle, never making eye contact across the room. It was the kind of avoidance that required deliberate effort. Rebecca Manning arrived in a flowing blue dress that accentuated her 7-month pregnancy. At 38, she'd struggled with fertility for years before this pregnancy, making today's celebration especially meaningful. Her husband Thomas helped her navigate the crowd of well-wishers, both of them glowing with happiness. Victoria, this is absolutely beautiful. Rebecca hugged her sister carefully around her expanding middle. You've outdone yourself. Only the best for my baby sister, Victoria replied, meaning every word despite her inner turmoil. Are you feeling all right, not too tired? I feel wonderful, excited, grateful, and ready to celebrate with all my favorite people. Rebecca's genuine joy made Victoria more determined to protect this day from whatever ugliness might be lurking beneath the surface. Helen Caldwell, Marcus's mother, arrived fashionably late as always. At 67, Helen had perfected the art of subtle condescension disguised as concern. She surveyed the decorations with a critical eye that found everything slightly excessive for her tastes. Victoria, dear, you've certainly gone all out, Helen said, air kissing Victoria's cheek. Though I do hope all this excitement isn't too much for Rebecca and her condition. I'm perfectly fine. Mrs. Caldwell, Rebecca interjected diplomatically. Victoria has been wonderfully thoughtful about everything. Helen's gaze swept the room and landed on Grace, who was efficiently refilling champagne glasses. And who is that young woman? She seems rather familiar with the house. Grace Sullivan, Dylan's wife. She's helping with the catering today. Victoria watched Helen's face carefully, wondering if the older woman had noticed something she'd missed. Ah, yes, the waitress. Helen's tone carried just enough disapproval to make Victoria bristle. How accommodating of her to work at a family event. Before Victoria could respond, Marcus appeared at her elbow. Mother, so glad you could make it. Can I get you some champagne? I suppose one glass wouldn't hurt. Helen accepted the drink but continued studying Grace with obvious disapproval. That young woman seems quite comfortable directing traffic in someone else's home. Marcus's jaw tightened. Grace is just being helpful. Victoria asked her to assist with the catering. Did she indeed? Helen's eyebrows rose slightly. How fortunate that she was available on such short notice. The comment hung in the air with implications that Victoria was only beginning to understand. Had Helen noticed something about Marcus and Grace? Or was she simply being her usual judgmental self about anyone she considered beneath the family's social status? The formal gift-opening portion of the shower began, with Rebecca settling into the place of honor, surrounded by beautifully wrapped packages. Victoria had organized everything perfectly. Each guest had been assigned specific gifts to give at specific moments to maximize the photographic opportunities. But as Rebecca began unwrapping the first present, Victoria found herself studying faces instead of focusing on the celebration. Dylan sat near the back of the room, smiling proudly as Emma helped Rebecca with the ribbon on a large box. He looked like a man completely content with his life, utterly trusting of everyone around him. Grace moved efficiently around the edges of the gathering, refilling glasses and removing empty plates, professional and invisible, except for the fact that she kept glancing toward Marcus with an expression Victoria couldn't quite read. And Marcus himself seemed increasingly agitated as the afternoon progressed, checking his phone frequently and looking toward the door as if expecting someone or planning an escape. Victoria excused herself to check on refreshments in the kitchen, needing a moment to think clearly. As she stood at the counter arranging fresh appetizers, she heard footsteps behind her. Mrs. Caldwell. Grace appeared in the doorway, holding an empty champagne bottle. We're running low on drinks. Should I open another case? Of course, they're in the pantry. Victoria gestured toward the large walk-in storage area adjacent to the kitchen. As Grace moved toward the pantry, Victoria noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. Grace was no longer wearing the golden pearl earrings that had caught Victoria's attention earlier. In fact, she wasn't wearing any earrings at all, which meant one of them was probably still sitting on Victoria's bedroom dresser. And if Grace had been in Victoria's bedroom, there was only one reason Marcus would have brought her there. The champagne glass didn't slip from Victoria's hand this time. She set it down deliberately and walked upstairs to confirm what she already knew in her heart. The earring lay exactly where she'd seen it that morning, glinting against the dark wood of her dresser like a small golden accusation. Victoria picked it up, feeling its weight in her palm, and finally accepted the truth she'd been avoiding all day. Her husband was having an affair with her best friend's wife, and they'd been conducting it in her own bedroom, in her own house, while she trusted them both completely. Victoria closed her fist around the earring and walked back downstairs to rejoin the party. She had a choice to make, and whatever she decided would change everything for everyone in that room. But first, she needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal ran. Victoria returned to the baby shower with Grace's earring burning like a coal in her closed fist. The living room buzzed with comfortable conversation as Rebecca continued opening gifts, each present generating appropriate oohs and ahs from the assembled women. Victoria, there you are. Jennifer Torres intercepted her near the kitchen door. I was wondering if you'd disappeared entirely. You've been playing hostess, but you look like you're somewhere else mentally, just making sure everything runs smoothly. Victoria deflected, slipping the earring into her jacket pocket. You know how I am about details. Jennifer's sharp gaze studied Victoria's face. Well, your attention to detail is usually what makes you such a successful CEO, but today you seem distracted by something specific. She paused meaningfully. Marcus seems jumpy too. Everything okay with you two? The question hit closer to home than Victoria was prepared for. Jennifer had known her for 8 years, had watched the evolution of her marriage through business dinners and social events. If Jennifer was noticing problems, they were probably more obvious than Victoria realized. We're fine, Victoria said automatically, then immediately regretted the defensive tone. Why would you think otherwise? Call it business instincts. When someone's body language doesn't match their words, I pay attention. Jennifer glanced around the room, her voice dropping. Plus, Marcus keeps checking his phone like he's expecting important news, and you keep watching him like you're waiting for him to do something specific. Before Victoria could respond, Rebecca's delighted laughter drew their attention back to the gift opening. She was holding up a beautiful baby monitor system, complete with video capabilities and smartphone connectivity. This is amazing. Now I can keep tabs on everything important from anywhere in the house, Rebecca said, examining the high-tech device with obvious pleasure. The irony wasn't lost on Victoria. Here was her sister celebrating technology that would help her monitor her baby's safety, while Victoria had just discovered evidence of betrayal happening under her own roof without her knowledge. Very modern, Helen Caldwell commented with mild disapproval. In my day, mothers simply listened for crying and trusted their instincts. Times change, Mrs. Caldwell, Dylan said good-naturedly from his spot near the back wall. Technology makes parenting easier in a lot of ways. Victoria noticed that Marcus had positioned himself where he could see both the gift opening area and the kitchen door, where Grace periodically appeared. He wasn't participating in conversations, just hovering and watching. When their eyes met accidentally across the room, he quickly looked away. Guilty behavior, Victoria realized. She'd seen enough presentations from nervous executives to recognize someone trying to control information and manage perceptions. Emma Sullivan wriggled in her chair and raised her small hand. Aunt Rebecca, can I tell everyone about Mommy's pretty new necklace? The room turned to look at the 6-year-old with indulgent smiles, but Victoria noticed Grace freeze in the kitchen doorway, her face pale. What necklace? Sweetheart, Rebecca asked kindly. The really sparkly one with the heart, mommy got it from the nice man who isn't daddy. Emma's innocent enthusiasm sent a chill through Victoria's entire body. Grace rushed forward quickly. Emma, honey, you're confused. Remember the story we read about the princess? That's what you're thinking about. No, mommy, the real necklace. The one you wear when Emma. Grace's voice carried a sharp edge that made several guests look up with surprise. The little girl's face crumpled with confusion, and Grace immediately softened her tone. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy's just tired. Why don't you help Aunt Rebecca with the next present? But the damage was done. Victoria caught Jennifer's raised eyebrows and Helen's suspicious frown. Dylan looked puzzled by his wife's strange reaction to their daughter's innocent comment, and Marcus had gone completely still, his face carefully blank in a way that suggested intense mental calculation. Victoria excused herself again, this time heading for the powder room where she could think without observation. As she passed the coat closet in the front hallway, she decided to check something that had been nagging at her subconsciously. Marcus's jacket hung exactly where Patricia had placed it when guests began arriving. Victoria slipped her hand into the pockets, feeling somewhat foolish but unable to stop herself. In the left inner pocket, her fingers closed around something small and metallic. She pulled out Grace's missing earring, the match to the one upstairs on her dresser. Victoria stared at the jewelry in her palm, her last hope of innocent explanations evaporating. There was no reason for Grace's earring to be in Marcus's jacket pocket unless they'd been intimate enough for her to lose it during their encounters. The powder room door opened, and Patricia emerged, looking startled to find Victoria standing in the hallway holding jewelry. Mrs. Caldwell, is everything all right? Patricia, Victoria said slowly, have you noticed anything unusual lately about Mr. Caldwell's schedule? Or anything else? The older woman's expression grew carefully neutral. What kind of unusual things? Phone calls at odd hours? Unexplained absences? Changes in routine? Victoria felt slightly ridiculous asking, but Patricia saw everything that happened in the house. Patricia hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty and honesty. There have been a few more business dinners than usual, and some Saturday morning meetings that seemed informal. Informal how? Well, when Mr. Caldwell has real business meetings, he dresses professionally and carries his briefcase. These Saturday meetings, he dressed more casually and seemed nervous rather than prepared. Victoria's heart sank. How long has this been going on? Perhaps 3 months. I didn't think it was my place to comment. 3 months. Victoria thought back to when Grace had started working more events for the restaurant, when she'd become a more frequent presence in their social circle. The timeline aligned perfectly. Thank you for being honest with me, Victoria said quietly. Patricia nodded and hurried back toward the kitchen, leaving Victoria alone with the evidence of her husband's betrayal and the sounds of her sister's joyful celebration drifting from the living room. Victoria returned to the party, slipping the earring into her pocket next to its match. Rebecca was opening a gift from Jennifer, an elegant diaper bag that had cost more than many people's monthly salary. Jennifer, this is gorgeous. You have such wonderful taste, Rebecca said, examining the designer bag with obvious delight. Only the best for my honorary niece or nephew, Jennifer replied warmly. I figure if you're going to carry baby supplies everywhere, they might as well be stylish. The easy affection between her business partner and sister made Victoria's chest tighten with emotion. These were the relationships that mattered. Honest, supportive, built on genuine care rather than deception. Grace appeared with fresh champagne, moving around the room with professional efficiency. When she reached Jennifer, Victoria noticed something that made her pulse quicken. Thank you, Jennifer said, accepting the refilled glass. Then, with the sharp observational skills that made her an excellent marketing executive, she added, That's a beautiful necklace you're wearing. The heart pendant is lovely. Victoria's eyes immediately went to Grace's throat. There, nestled just below her collarbone, was a delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant that caught the light beautifully. Expensive jewelry that a waitress probably couldn't afford on her salary. Jewelry that Emma had mentioned to the entire room. Oh, this old thing, Grace's hand flew to her throat self-consciously. It was a gift. From your husband, Jennifer asked with innocent curiosity. Grace's pause lasted a fraction too long. Yes, of course, Dylan has wonderful taste. But Victoria was watching Dylan's face, and she saw the flicker of confusion that crossed his features. Whatever that necklace was, he hadn't given it to his wife. Helen Caldwell had also noticed the exchange. Her pale blue eyes moved from Grace's necklace to Marcus's face, and Victoria saw recognition dawn in the older woman's expression. Helen knew something, or at least suspected something. Marcus, Helen said in a caring voice, that's a lovely necklace the young woman is wearing. It reminds me of the one you bought Victoria for your anniversary several years ago. The entire room seemed to pause. Victoria felt her face flush as she remembered the necklace Marcus had given her for their 15th anniversary. A gold heart pendant from Tiffany with a custom engraving on the back. A necklace that had been missing from her jewelry box for 2 months. Marcus's face had gone white. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Mother, heart pendants are fairly common. Are they? Helen's voice carried Arctic disapproval. How interesting. Grace's hand remained at her throat, her fingers clutching the pendant as if she could hide it. Several guests were now paying attention to the undercurrent of tension. Sensing drama without understanding its source, Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. Grace, that really is a beautiful necklace. Would you mind if I took a closer look? That's not necessary, Grace stammered, taking a step backward. Oh, but I insist. I have an eye for quality jewelry, and that piece looks quite expensive. Victoria's voice remained pleasant and conversational, but there was steel underneath. Every woman in the room understood the subtext. Jewelry was a language they all spoke, and expensive gifts from mysterious sources told a very specific story. Grace looked trapped, her eyes darting toward Marcus for help. But Marcus was carefully studying his hands, offering no rescue from the situation he'd created. Actually, Dylan said slowly, standing up from his chair, I'd like to see it too. If I gave my wife such a beautiful gift, I should remember doing it. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma looked confused by the sudden tension among the adults. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. And Victoria realized that her marriage wasn't the only one about to explode in front of 25 witnesses. The question was whether she wanted to detonate the bomb herself or wait for someone else to light the fuse. Looking around the room at the faces of her family and friends, Victoria made a choice that would change everything. Grace, she said clearly, I think we need to have a conversation. Right now. Grace Sullivan stood frozen in the center of Victoria's living room, her hand still clutching the heart pendant at her throat. 25 pairs of eyes watched her with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion, while the tension in the room grew thick enough to cut with a knife. A conversation about what? Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. About where you really got that necklace, Victoria said calmly, though her heart was racing. Because my husband claims he doesn't remember giving it to you, and your husband looks equally confused about this generous gift. Dylan stepped forward, his construction worker hands clenched at his sides. Grace, what's going on? I've never seen that necklace before in my life. You must have forgotten, Grace stammered. You gave it to me for my birthday last month. Your birthday was 3 months ago, Dylan said slowly, his voice carrying the first edge of real suspicion. And I gave you the earrings that you're not wearing today. Victoria reached into her pocket and pulled out both gold and pearl earrings, holding them up for everyone to see. You mean these earrings, the ones I found in my husband's jacket pocket and on my bedroom dresser? The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Rebecca's hands went to her mouth in dismay. Jennifer's business-sharp mind was clearly putting pieces together at lightning speed. Helen Caldwell nodded with grim satisfaction, as if her worst suspicions had been confirmed. And Marcus finally looked up from his hands, his face a mask of panic and calculation. Victoria, you're misunderstanding the situation, he said carefully. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Then explain it, Victoria cut him off. Explain why Grace's jewelry is scattered throughout our house. Explain why she knows her way around our bedroom well enough to lose earrings there. Grace started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were the frustrated tears of someone whose carefully constructed deception was crumbling in public. It's not what you think, she said desperately. Marcus and I, we're just friends. Good friends who... Friends, Dylan's voice cracked with disbelief. Good friends who exchange expensive jewelry and meet in other people's bedrooms. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve, confused by the raised voices and adult tension. Daddy, why is everyone upset? Why is Mommy crying? Patricia appeared as if summoned by parental instinct, gently taking Emma's hand. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go see if there are any cookies left in the kitchen. As Patricia led the little girl away from the escalating confrontation, Victoria felt a surge of gratitude for the housekeeper's wisdom. Whatever was about to happen, a 6-year-old didn't need to witness her family's destruction. I want the truth, Dylan said, his voice raw with pain. All of it. How long has this been going on? Grace and Marcus exchanged a look that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but confirmed everything Victoria had suspected. They weren't just having an affair. They were partners in deception, with shared secrets and coordinated lies. How long? Victoria repeated Dylan's question, her voice deadly quiet. Marcus stood up slowly, his lawyer instincts finally kicking in. I think we should discuss this privately. Without an audience? Oh no, Helen Caldwell said sharply. You forfeited your right to privacy when you decided to conduct your sordid affair in front of God and everyone. These people deserve to know what kind of man you really are. Mother, please. Don't you dare, Mother. Please me. Marcus James Caldwell. I raised you to be better than this. Helen's voice carried the authority of decades of disappointment in human behavior. This young woman has been flaunting your gifts in front of your wife's face, and you've been letting her. Victoria realized she needed to take control of the situation before it spiraled completely out of hand. Her sister was 7 months pregnant and didn't need the stress of family drama. Her friends and colleagues were witnessing personal humiliation that would spread through their social and professional circles within hours, but she also couldn't let Marcus and Grace escape without accountability. I want to know how long this has been going on, Victoria said firmly. And I want to know how many other people you've made fools of while you've been sneaking around behind our backs. Victoria, please, Grace sobbed. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant to hurt anyone. But you did hurt people, Jennifer interjected, her voice sharp with protective anger. You hurt Victoria, who trusted you enough to give you work. You hurt Dylan, who welcomed you into his family. And you're hurting that little girl who thinks her parents love each other. The truth of Jennifer's words seemed to hit Grace like a physical blow. She sank into the nearest chair, her hands covering her face. Dylan looked like a man who'd been punched in the stomach. How long, Grace? How long have you been lying to me? 3 months, Marcus answered when Grace remained silent. It started 3 months ago. 3 months, Dylan repeated slowly. 3 months of coming home to you every night, making love to you, planning our future together, while you were. He couldn't finish the sentence. The betrayal was too raw, too complete. Victoria felt a strange sense of detachment as she watched her best friend's world collapse. Part of her wanted to comfort Dylan, to offer support and solidarity in their shared humiliation, but another part of her was calculating the implications with the same strategic mind that had built her successful business. Her marriage was over. That much was clear. But how it ended, and what kind of life she built afterward, depended on the choices she made in the next few minutes. I want you both out of my house, Victoria said quietly. Now, Victoria, we need to talk about this rationally, Marcus protested. We need to discuss logistics, finances, custody arrangements. We need to discuss nothing. You made your choice 3 months ago. Now I'm making mine. Victoria's voice carried the authority of a CEO who'd learned to make difficult decisions under pressure. Get out. You can't just throw me out of my own house, Marcus said, his panic making him sound petulant rather than authoritative. Actually, I can. This house is in my name, purchased with income from my business. You'll be hearing from my attorney on Monday morning. Victoria had spent enough time around lawyers to understand the basics of asset protection. Grace stood up unsteadily, her beautiful face streaked with mascara. Dylan, please, can we go home and talk about this? I can explain everything. Explain what? Dylan's voice was hollow. How you've been using me as cover while you destroy another family. How you've been kissing me goodnight after spending the day in another man's bed. It wasn't like that, Grace whispered. Then what was it like? Dylan demanded. Tell me exactly what it was like. Grace, tell me how you justified lying to me every single day for 3 months. Grace opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth was too ugly to speak aloud in front of witnesses. Victoria realized that everyone in the room was watching the drama unfold with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a car accident. Her sister's baby shower had become a public spectacle of marital destruction. "Everyone should probably go," Victoria announced. "This obviously isn't the celebration we planned." "No," Rebecca said firmly, struggling to her feet despite her advanced pregnancy. "This is my baby shower, and I'm not letting these two selfish people ruin it completely." Rebecca's unexpected strength surprised everyone in the room. Her voice carried authority that no one had heard from her before. "Marcus and Grace, you need to leave immediately. Everyone else, we're going to finish celebrating this baby, because that's what today was supposed to be about." Rebecca's hands rested protectively on her belly. "I refuse to let my child's first party be remembered as the day two people destroyed their families in public." Helen Caldwell actually smiled with approval. "Well said, my dear. Some things are more important than other people's drama." Jennifer immediately moved to Rebecca's side. "Absolutely. Victoria, where do you keep the good champagne? We're going to toast to new beginnings." As Rebecca's unexpected leadership galvanized the remaining guests into action, Marcus and Grace found themselves increasingly isolated. The social dynamics had shifted decisively against them, and their attempts at explanation or justification fell on ears that had already heard enough. "Dylan," Marcus tried one last time, "we've been friends for 15 years. That has to count for something." Dylan looked at his former best friend with an expression that mixed pity with disgust. 15 years of friendship, and you threw it away for 3 months of sneaking around with my wife. You're right, Marcus. That does count for something. It counts as the stupidest decision you've ever made." Grace gathered her purse and jacket with shaking hands while Dylan stood perfectly still, as if movement might shatter his remaining composure. "I'll pick up Emma later," Grace said quietly. "No, you won't," Dylan replied. "Emma will stay with me until we figure out custody arrangements. You've lost the right to make parenting decisions until we sort out the legal implications of your choices." The finality in Dylan's voice seemed to hit Grace harder than any of the previous accusations. She was losing not just her marriage, but potentially her relationship with her daughter. As Marcus and Grace left through the front door, the baby shower guests watched in stunned silence. Then Jennifer raised her champagne glass with determined cheer. "To Rebecca and her baby," she announced, "may they be surrounded by people who understand the meaning of loyalty and love." The toast was repeated throughout the room, but Victoria barely heard it. She was thinking about the conversation she'd need to have with her attorney, the business partnerships that might be affected by a public divorce, and the reality of rebuilding her life at 42. But first, she needed to survive the rest of this day and help her sister finish celebrating the new life that was coming into their family. Some endings, Victoria realized, were also beginnings. Victoria excused herself to the guest bathroom, her mind racing as the sounds of forced celebration drifted through the walls. Rebecca's determination to salvage her baby shower was admirable, but Victoria could hear the brittle edge underneath her sister's cheerful voice. Standing in front of the mirror, Victoria studied her reflection with critical assessment. 42 years old, successful CEO, wife of 18 years, and now a woman whose marriage had just exploded in front of 25 witnesses. Her carefully applied makeup showed stress fractures around her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the marble countertop. But underneath the shock and humiliation, Victoria felt something unexpected relief. For 3 months, she'd been sensing that something was wrong without being able to identify it. Marcus's distracted behavior, his new interest in Saturday morning meetings, his decreased attention to their intimate life, all of it finally made sense. She wasn't losing her mind or becoming paranoid. Her instincts had been correct all along. The question now was what to do with that knowledge. Victoria pulled out her phone and quickly searched for information about divorce proceedings in their state. As a successful business owner, she'd always been careful about financial planning and asset protection. The house was in her name, purchased with income from Caldwell Marketing. Her business partnership with Jennifer was structured to protect both partners' interests. Her retirement accounts and investment portfolio were substantial enough to ensure financial independence. Marcus, despite his lawyer salary, had always lived above his means. His BMW lease, his country club membership, his expensive suits and watches, All of it was supported by Victoria's business success rather than his legal practice income. A knock on the bathroom door interrupted her research. Victoria, it's Jennifer. Are you okay in there? Victoria opened the door to find her business partner holding 2 glasses of champagne and wearing an expression of practical concern. I brought reinforcements, Jennifer said, offering one of the glasses. And I sent Helen to keep Rebecca company while we talk. They moved to Victoria's home office, a sophisticated space decorated with awards from successful marketing campaigns and framed photos of business achievements. Jennifer closed the door behind them and settled into the chair across from Victoria's desk. Okay, talk to me. How long have you suspected? Honestly, about 3 weeks, maybe a month. Victoria sipped her champagne, grateful for the alcohol's steadying effect. Little things that didn't quite add up. Marcus being secretive about his phone, unexplained absences, changes in our intimate relationship. Why didn't you say anything? Because I hoped I was wrong. Because accusing your husband of having an affair without proof is a conversation you can't take back. Victoria laughed bitterly. Turns out I didn't need to worry about proof. They were practically advertising their relationship. Jennifer leaned forward, her business mind clearly working through implications. What's your next move legally? I mean, divorce, obviously, but I need to be strategic about it. Victoria pulled up the notes she'd been making on her phone. I've been thinking about this for exactly 30 minutes, and I already know I want a clean break. No alimony, no extended negotiations, no attempts at reconciliation. What about the business? Marcus has been involved in some of our client relationships. Victoria had been wondering about that herself. Marcus occasionally joined client dinners and social events related to Caldwell marketing, but he'd never been officially involved in the business operations. He's a spectator, not a participant. All the client relationships are mine or yours. He might have met some people socially, but he doesn't have any contractual or financial involvement. Victoria felt a surge of gratitude for her younger self's insistence on keeping the business completely separate from her marriage. Good. That makes things cleaner. Jennifer paused, studying Victoria's face. How are you feeling about all this emotionally? I mean, it was a question Victoria had been avoiding asking herself. Humiliated, angry, betrayed. She paused, searching for complete honesty, but also relieved, which makes me feel guilty. Why relieved? Because now I know why our marriage has felt hollow for the past year. It wasn't my imagination or middle-age anxiety. It was Marcus checking out emotionally while he pursued someone else. Victoria set down her champagne glass. I've been trying to fix something that was already broken, and I didn't even know it. Through the office window, Victoria could see her backyard where the baby shower decorations still fluttered in the afternoon breeze. White roses and pink ribbons, symbols of celebration and new beginnings that now felt like props in a badly scripted drama. There's something else, Victoria said slowly. I think Dylan is going to need support getting through this. Grace isn't just his wife, she's Emma's mother. He's dealing with betrayal plus potential custody issues. You're thinking about helping him. I'm thinking we're both going to need divorce attorneys, and mine might be able to recommend someone good for his situation. Victoria felt the first stirrings of something that might eventually become friendship born from shared experience. Plus, he's going to need allies who understand what Grace and Marcus are capable of. Jennifer nodded approvingly. Strategic thinking. I like it. A gentle knock interrupted them, and Rebecca's voice came through the door. Victoria, can I come in? Rebecca entered carefully, her pregnant form moving with the deliberate grace of someone carrying precious cargo. She settled into Jennifer's chair when Jennifer offered it, one hand resting on her belly. I wanted to check on you before people start leaving, Rebecca said. That was intense. I'm sorry your baby shower got hijacked by my marriage problems, Victoria said sincerely. You deserved better than that circus. Actually, I'm proud of how you handled it. Rebecca's voice carried surprising firmness. You could have swept it under the rug, pretended nothing was wrong, let them continue making fools of everyone. Instead, you demanded the truth in front of witnesses. It felt like the right thing to do in the moment, but I'm second-guessing myself now. Don't. Rebecca shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position. Thomas and I have been married for 6 years, and the one thing I've learned is that secrets are poison. They corrupt everything they touch. You exposed the poison before it could spread any further. Jennifer looked at Rebecca with new respect. That's remarkably wise for someone who just watched her sister's marriage explode at her baby shower. Pregnancy gives you perspective on what's really important, Rebecca replied. I'm bringing a child into this world, and I want them to grow up understanding that integrity matters more than avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Victoria felt a surge of love for her younger sister. Rebecca had always been the peacemaker in their family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and avoided confrontation. Seeing her stand up for principles over comfort was both surprising and inspiring. What happens now? Rebecca asked. With the divorce? With Dylan and Emma? With everything. Now I start over, Victoria said simply. I rebuild my life around relationships that are honest and people who are trustworthy. It won't be easy, but it'll be real. Through the office walls, they could hear the sounds of the baby shower winding down. Guests saying goodbye, making polite small talk about the lovely afternoon, despite the dramatic interruption, promising to call soon to check on everyone. I should go back out there, Victoria said reluctantly. Help people leave gracefully and start cleaning up the mess. We'll help, Jennifer offered immediately. Both of you have done enough. This is my situation to handle. But Rebecca shook her head. We're family, and family helps each other through the hard times, not just the celebrations. As they prepared to rejoin the remaining guests, Victoria realized something important. She'd lost a husband and a marriage today, but she'd gained clarity about who her real support system was. Jennifer's immediate loyalty, Rebecca's unexpected strength, even Helen's blunt honesty. These were relationships built on substance rather than convenience. Marcus and Grace had chosen deception and betrayal, thinking they could have their new relationship without consequences for their old ones. They'd calculated wrong. Victoria straightened her shoulders and opened the office door. She had a party to finish, guests to see off gracefully, and a new life to begin planning. But first, she needed to call her attorney. The baby shower guests began departing with the awkward efficiency of people who'd witnessed more drama than they'd bargained for. Victoria stood by her front door, accepting sympathetic hugs and murmured words of support while mentally cataloging who would be discussing this afternoon's events at dinner tables across the city. Helen Caldwell was among the last to leave, approaching Victoria with an expression that mixed disapproval with something that might have been pride. Victoria, dear, I owe you an apology, the older woman said, surprising everyone within earshot. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Caldwell. I suspected something was wrong with Marcus's behavior, but I chose to hope I was mistaken rather than warn you. Helen's voice carried the weight of genuine regret. That was cowardly of me, and you deserve better from your mother-in-law. Victoria felt tears threaten for the first time all afternoon. Thank you for saying that. That young woman showed her true character today, and my son showed his. I'm ashamed of them both, but I'm proud of how you handled yourself. Helen paused, seeming to weigh her words carefully. If you need anything during the divorce proceedings, character witnesses, financial documentation, anything at all, you call me immediately. The offer was unexpected and generous, especially coming from Marcus's own mother. Victoria realized that Helen's loyalty ran deeper than blood, rooted in principles about right and wrong that transcended family relationships. I may take you up on that, Victoria said gratefully. After the last guest departed, Victoria surveyed the damage to her previously perfect living room. Champagne glasses sat abandoned on side tables. Appetizer plates held crumbs and picked over garnishes. And Rebecca's open gifts created a landscape of ribbon and wrapping paper that felt surreal given the afternoon's events. Dylan appeared in the doorway, holding Emma's hand. The little girl clutched a small party favor bag and looked confused by the adult tension that had surrounded her. I wanted to thank you before we left, Dylan said quietly, and to apologize for Grace's behavior in your home. You don't need to apologize for her choices, Victoria replied firmly. She's responsible for her own actions. Emma tugged on Dylan's sleeve. Daddy, where's Mommy? Is she coming home with us? Dylan's face crumpled slightly before he regained control. Mommy has some things to take care of, sweetheart. She'll see you soon. Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, remembering all the times she'd wanted children of her own, and Marcus had insisted they should wait until his career was more established, until they'd saved more money, until the timing was perfect. Another lie, apparently. Emma, Did you have fun at the party today? Yes, Aunt Rebecca got lots of pretty things for the baby. Emma's 6-year-old mind had processed the afternoon's events as adult confusion rather than family destruction. Will you come visit us soon? I'd like that very much, Victoria promised, meaning it completely. As Dylan prepared to leave with Emma, he hesitated in the doorway. Victoria, I know this is terrible timing, but I need to ask you something. What is it? How long do you think this has been going on? Really, I mean, not just the 3 months Marcus admitted to. Victoria considered the question carefully. I think 3 months is probably accurate for the physical affair, but emotional affairs usually start earlier. Why? Because Grace has been different for longer than 3 months. Distant, secretive, critical of things that never bothered her before. Dylan's voice carried the pain of someone reconstructing his reality. I thought it was stress from work, or maybe postpartum depression that never fully resolved after Emma. I never considered. You never considered that your wife was building an emotional connection with another man because you're a decent person who doesn't think that way. Victoria finished. That's not a character flaw. Dylan, that's evidence that you're trustworthy. Right now it feels like evidence that I'm naive. Don't let their betrayal change your fundamental nature. The world needs people who trust and love honestly. After Dylan and Emma left, Victoria found Jennifer and Rebecca in the kitchen, efficiently loading the dishwasher and packing away leftover food. You two don't need to clean up my mess, Victoria protested. We're not cleaning up your mess, Rebecca corrected. We're cleaning up Marcus and Grace's mess. Your only mistake was trusting people who didn't deserve it. Patricia appeared from the laundry room carrying a basket of linens. Mrs. Caldwell, I took the liberty of washing the champagne glass that broke earlier. The stain came out of the tablecloth perfectly. Victoria realized that Patricia was offering her a metaphor along with practical information. Some damage could be cleaned up and repaired. Some stains could be removed with the right care and attention. Thank you, Patricia, for everything today, but especially for protecting Emma from the worst of what happened. That little girl has seen enough change for one day, Patricia replied practically. Children need stability when the adult world gets complicated. As the cleanup continued, Victoria's phone buzzed with text messages. Marcus had sent several increasingly desperate attempts at communication, starting with requests for private conversation and escalating to accusations that she'd humiliated him unnecessarily. Victoria deleted them all without responding. Grace had also texted, a rambling message that mixed apologies with justifications and ended with a request to meet somewhere private to explain everything properly. Victoria deleted that one too. Good instincts, Jennifer said, noticing Victoria's phone management. Don't engage with them until you've talked to a lawyer. Anything you say now could be used against you later. I keep thinking about Emma, Victoria said suddenly. She's 6 years old and her parents just destroyed her family. How do you explain that to a child? Very carefully with lots of professional help, Rebecca replied. Dylan will figure it out. He's a good father. He is. And Grace is about to lose a lot more than just her marriage. Jennifer looked up from loading serving dishes. What do you mean, think about it? She's a waitress with no significant assets, no education beyond high school, and no family money. Dylan owns a successful construction company, has community ties, and can provide stable housing and education for Emma. Victoria felt no satisfaction in the calculation, only sadness for the collateral damage of adult selfishness. If they end up in custody court, Grace is going to be at a significant disadvantage. Do you think that occurred to her when she was making her choices? Rebecca asked. I don't think Grace thought beyond the immediate gratification of the affair. She and Marcus were living in a fantasy where they could have their new relationship without consequences for their old ones. Speaking of consequences, Jennifer said, have you thought about the professional implications Marcus has been to a lot of business dinners and client events with you over the years? Victoria had been dreading that conversation. Caldwell Marketing had built its reputation on trust and relationship management. Having her personal life become public drama could affect client confidence in business relationships. I'll need to get ahead of the story, Victoria said slowly. Control the narrative before it gets distorted by gossip and speculation. How do you want to handle it? Honestly, but professionally, Marcus's infidelity reflects on his character, not on my business judgment or the company's stability. Victoria felt her CEO instincts kicking in. I'll draft a brief statement acknowledging the divorce without going into sordid details. Rebecca looked impressed. You're already thinking strategically about damage control. That's what successful business owners do. We assess problems objectively and develop solutions based on facts rather than emotions. Is that what you're doing with your marriage too? Assessing it objectively? Victoria considered the question seriously. Yes, I think I am. The emotional processing will come later. But right now I need to make practical decisions about legal representation, asset protection, and business continuity. Patricia finished her cleanup tasks and gathered her purse. Mrs. Caldwell, I'll be here Monday morning as usual. Should I expect changes to the household routine? Mr. Caldwell won't be living here anymore, Victoria said simply. Other than that, everything else stays the same. After Patricia left, the three women sat in Victoria's kitchen surrounded by the aftermath of the strangest baby shower in family history. The elegant decorations still hung in the backyard, white roses and pink ribbons fluttering in the evening breeze like ghosts of the celebration that should have been. I keep thinking about the timing, Victoria said suddenly. They chose today to have their confrontation, Rebecca's baby shower, surrounded by family and friends. What kind of people use someone else's celebration as cover for their own drama? Selfish people, Jennifer replied bluntly. People who think their immediate desires matter more than other people's feelings. I'm actually grateful it happened this way, Rebecca said, surprising both of them. If you'd discovered the affair privately, you might have been tempted to keep it secret, try to work things out, give Marcus another chance to lie to you. You think I would have done that? I think you're a problem solver who believes in fixing things that are broken. But some things can't be fixed. Victoria, some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome. As the evening shadows lengthened across her backyard, Victoria realized that Rebecca was right. If she'd discovered the affair quietly, in private, she might have convinced herself that it could be repaired. She might have accepted Marcus's inevitable promises to end the relationship and work on their marriage. Instead, she'd seen the truth about who Marcus and Grace really were when pressure was applied. They were people who would sacrifice other people's happiness for their own gratification, who would lie to the faces of people who trusted them, who would use children and celebrations as shields for their deception. Victoria didn't want to be married to someone like that, and tomorrow, she would start the legal process of making sure she never had to be again. Victoria sat in her lawyer's office Monday morning, watching Margaret Sullivan review the documentation she'd prepared over the weekend. Margaret was known as one of the city's most effective divorce attorneys, with a reputation for protecting successful women's financial interests during high-conflict separations. This is remarkably thorough, Margaret said, studying Victoria's organized files. Financial statements, business records, property documentation, evidence of the affair. You've done 90% of my initial work for me. I spent 18 years building a successful business. I know how to prepare for important negotiations. Victoria felt calmer than she'd expected, sitting in the leather chair across from Margaret's mahogany desk. I want this divorce to be swift and decisive. Tell me about the affair evidence. What exactly did you witness? Victoria recounted Saturday's events, from finding Grace's earring to the public confrontation at the baby shower. Margaret took notes with the efficiency of someone who'd heard similar stories countless times. Public exposure of the affair actually works in your favor, Margaret explained. It eliminates any possibility of Marcus claiming temporary insanity or marriage counseling as alternatives to divorce. With multiple witnesses to his behavior, he can't credibly argue for reconciliation. What about Grace's involvement? Does that affect Dylan's situation? I can recommend excellent family law attorneys who specialize in custody cases involving infidelity. The fact that Grace was conducting an affair while caring for a 6-year-old daughter won't help her in family court. Victoria's phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. She'd received 17 messages since Saturday, ranging from apologies to accusations to demands for face-to-face meetings. Margaret advised her to forward all communication to the law office and block Marcus's number entirely. He's going to escalate his attempts to contact you, Margaret warned. Men like your husband don't handle loss of control well. They're accustomed to using charm and manipulation to manage situations. What kind of escalation should I expect? showing up at your house, your office, ambushing you in public places, enlisting mutual friends to advocate for reconciliation, possibly making threats about business or financial retaliation. Victoria thought about Marcus's law firm connections and his familiarity with her business clients. Can he do anything to damage my company? Not legally, but divorce proceedings sometimes bring out vindictive behavior in people who feel cornered. Margaret's expression grew serious. I want you to document any contact attempts, change your locks immediately, and consider security cameras for your home and office. The precautions felt surreal. After 18 years of marriage, Victoria was being advised to treat her husband as a potential threat rather than a trusted partner. Her phone rang, displaying Jennifer's number. Victoria answered, putting the call on speaker with Margaret's permission. Victoria, we have a problem, Jennifer said without preamble. Marcus is in our office lobby, demanding to speak with you about urgent business matters. Margaret leaned forward. Don't engage with him. Tell security to escort him out immediately. We don't have security, Victoria replied. It's a small marketing firm, not a corporate headquarters. Then call the police, Margaret advised. He has no legal right to be in your workplace, and his presence constitutes harassment. Victoria felt a surge of anger at Marcus's tactics. He was trying to bring their personal drama into her professional environment, potentially embarrassing her in front of employees and clients. Jennifer, call the police and have him removed. If he continues to show up, we'll get a restraining order. After ending the call, Margaret continued outlining Victoria's legal options. The house was in Victoria's name, purchased with income from her business. Marcus would have no claim to the property or her company assets. His lawyer's salary had supported his personal expenses and lifestyle choices, but hadn't contributed to their major investments. What about alimony? Victoria asked. Highly unlikely. You out-earn him significantly. The marriage lasted less than 20 years, and he's capable of supporting himself. The infidelity evidence also weighs against any spousal support claims. Victoria felt relief wash over her. She'd been worried about being financially tied to Marcus for years after the divorce, forced to subsidize his lifestyle while he built a new life with Grace. Margaret's assistant knocked on the door. Mrs. Sullivan? Mr. Caldwell is online too, requesting to speak with Mrs. Caldwell about urgent legal matters. Inform Mr. Caldwell that all communication must go through this office from now on, Margaret instructed. Mrs. Caldwell is not available for direct contact. As they finished the initial consultation, Victoria realized she felt lighter than she had in months. The legal process would be emotionally difficult and time-consuming, but it had clear parameters and predictable outcomes. Unlike trying to repair a marriage built on lies, divorce proceedings followed rules and precedents that made sense. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. Can you recommend a good family law attorney? Grace is threatening to take Emma and move out of state. Victoria forwarded Margaret's family law referral immediately, along with a brief message of support. She and Dylan were now allies in the aftermath of their spouse's betrayal, united by shared experience and mutual understanding of what Grace and Marcus were capable of. Driving back to her office, Victoria passed the restaurant where Grace worked. Chez Laurent's elegant facade and valet parking represented the upscale dining establishment where she'd often entertained clients, unaware that her husband was conducting an affair with one of the servers. Victoria made a mental note to find new venues for business dinners. Some places held too many memories of betrayal to remain neutral territory. At Caldwell Marketing, Jennifer briefed her on Marcus's morning visit. He'd been polite but insistent, claiming he needed to discuss client relationships that might be affected by their temporary separation. I told him there was no temporary separation, only a permanent divorce, Jennifer reported. He didn't take that well. What did he say? That you were making emotional decisions you'd regret, and that he'd wait for you to come to your senses about the value of your marriage. Victoria felt disgust at Marcus's assumption that she'd eventually forgive his betrayal for the sake of maintaining their social status and financial partnership. Did any clients witness his visit? Fortunately, no, but the staff is obviously curious about what happened. Do you want to address it directly? Victoria gathered her employees in the conference room for a brief meeting. She'd always believed in transparent communication with her team, and the current situation required careful message management. As some of you may have heard, Marcus and I are getting divorced, Victoria announced without preamble. This is a personal matter that won't affect business operations or client relationships. If anyone has questions about work-related issues, please come to me or Jennifer directly. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes, but Victoria felt it accomplished two important goals: controlling the narrative and demonstrating business as usual stability for her employees. That afternoon, Victoria received a call from Helen Caldwell requesting a private meeting. They arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop near Victoria's office, away from social circles where they might be recognized. Helen arrived precisely on time, dressed in her usual elegant style, but looking older than Victoria remembered. The weekend's revelations had clearly taken a toll on Marcus's mother. Victoria, I want you to know that I've already spoken with my attorney about removing Marcus from my will, Helen said without preamble. His behavior is inexcusable, and I won't reward it with inheritance. The announcement was shocking in its finality. Helen had always favored Marcus as her only child, despite his flaws and selfish tendencies. Mrs. Caldwell, you don't need to make such drastic decisions immediately. This is all very fresh and emotional. It's not emotional, dear. It's practical. Marcus has shown that he values immediate gratification over long-term relationships and commitments. That's not the kind of person I want controlling my estate or representing my family values. Helen's decision reflected a principle-based worldview that Victoria found both admirable and heartbreaking. Marcus had lost not only his wife and best friend, but also his mother's respect and financial legacy. I also want to testify on your behalf if needed, Helen continued. Character witness, family dynamics, Marcus's history of selfishness. Whatever your attorney thinks would be helpful. Victoria felt tears threaten again. Helen's loyalty was unexpected and generous, especially given the complexity of taking sides against her own son. Why are you doing this? Victoria asked gently. Because integrity matters more than biology. Because you've been a better daughter-in-law than Marcus has been a son. And because that little girl Emma deserves to see adults who stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. As Victoria drove home that evening, she reflected on the day's revelations. Marcus was already demonstrating the vindictive behavior Margaret had predicted, trying to manipulate and control the situation through harassment and emotional pressure. But he was also learning that Victoria had resources and support systems he hadn't fully appreciated. Jennifer's business partnership, Margaret's legal expertise, Helen's principled loyalty. These relationships were built on mutual respect and shared values rather than convenience and dependency. Marcus and Grace had gambled that they could have their affair without meaningful consequences. They'd assumed that Victoria and Dylan would eventually accept the betrayal for the sake of avoiding public embarrassment and family disruption. They'd calculated wrong. Victoria pulled into her driveway, noting the locksmith's van parked on the street. By tomorrow morning, Marcus would discover that his house key no longer worked, and his belongings would be packed and waiting for pickup. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt, and Victoria was finally ready to stop trying. The locksmith finished installing new deadbolts on Victoria's front and back doors as the sun set Tuesday evening. She stood in her kitchen watching him work, feeling an odd mixture of security and sadness. After 18 years of marriage, she was now taking measures to keep her husband out of what had once been their shared home. These are top-quality locks, what, ma'am? The locksmith explained, handing her the new keys. Bump-proof, pick-resistant, and the hardware is reinforced. You'd need serious tools to get through these. Victoria pocketed the keys, hoping she'd never need to test their effectiveness. Margaret had insisted on the upgrade after Marcus's harassment at her office, predicting that his behavior would escalate when he realized Victoria was serious about the divorce. Her phone rang as the locksmith packed his tools. Dylan's name appeared on the screen, and Victoria answered immediately. How are you holding up? She asked. Better than expected. Actually, worse than I hoped. Dylan's voice carried exhaustion mixed with grim determination. I met with the family law attorney you recommended today. She thinks we have a strong case for primary custody. That's good news. Maybe. Grace hired her own lawyer. Apparently Marcus recommended someone from his firm. They're claiming I'm being vindictive and using Emma as a weapon to punish Grace for one mistake. Victoria felt anger flare on Dylan's behalf. One mistake that lasted 3 months and destroyed 2 families. Exactly. But they're spinning it as a temporary lapse in judgment caused by stress and marriage problems that existed before the affair started. The revisionist history was exactly what Victoria had expected from Marcus and Grace. Rather than accepting responsibility for their choices, they were rewriting the narrative to minimize their culpability and shift blame to their betrayed spouses. How's Emma handling everything? She knows mommy and daddy are having problems, but I don't think she understands the permanence yet. She keeps asking when mommy's coming home. Dylan's voice cracked slightly. I don't know how to explain that mommy chose to leave our family for someone else. Victoria's heart ached for both Dylan and Emma. The little girl was an innocent victim of her parents' selfishness, forced to navigate adult complexities that shouldn't touch a 6-year-old's world. The attorney recommended a child therapist who specializes in divorce situations, Dylan continued. Someone who can help Emma process the changes and maintain stability. That sounds wise. Professional help for both of you. Probably. Yeah, I start individual counseling next week. Apparently, I need to work through trust issues and anger management before I'm ready for any future relationships. The conversation ended with promises to stay in touch and mutual support offers. Victoria realized that her friendship with Dylan was evolving from shared social history to genuine alliance based on common experience and values. Wednesday morning brought a new challenge. Victoria arrived at her office to find Marcus waiting in the parking lot beside his BMW, looking haggard and desperate. She considered calling the police immediately, but decided to hear what he had to say first. Victoria, please, just 5 minutes of conversation. That's all I'm asking. You've had 18 years of conversation. Marcus, you chose to have the important ones with Grace instead. I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that I regret every second of every day. Marcus's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the pleading tone of someone who'd lost control of his situation. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, rebuild trust, start over. Victoria studied her husband's face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding of the damage he'd caused. Instead, she saw calculation and manipulation, the same skills that made him an effective lawyer being deployed to salvage his personal life. Marcus, do you understand why I'm divorcing you? Because you're hurt and angry about the affair, which is completely understandable, and I take full responsibility for my actions. No, you don't understand. Victoria felt a strange sense of pity for his fundamental misreading of the situation. I'm divorcing you because you're not the person I thought I married. The Marcus I thought I knew would never have been capable of lying to my face for 3 months while sleeping with my best friend's wife. People make mistakes, Victoria. Even good people sometimes make terrible choices. This wasn't a mistake, Marcus. It was a series of deliberate decisions made over months while you watched Dylan trust you and watch me trust you. That's not a good person making a mistake. That's a selfish person revealing their true character. Marcus's face hardened as he realized that emotional appeals weren't working. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, we'll do it the hard way. But you should know that divorce is going to cost you more than you think. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. I know your clients, your business relationships, your professional reputation. Divorce proceedings can get very public, very messy, very expensive. Marcus's lawyer instincts were taking over, calculating leverage and pressure points. You might want to consider whether protecting your pride is worth damaging your business. Victoria felt ice-cold clarity wash over her. Marcus was threatening to sabotage her professional life unless she accepted his infidelity and stayed married to protect their mutual social and financial status. Marcus, let me be very clear about something. If you attempt to interfere with my business or damage my professional relationships, I will destroy you publicly and professionally. I have documentation of your affair, witness testimony, and enough evidence to end your legal career permanently. You wouldn't do that. Try me. I built Caldwell Marketing without your help, and I'll protect it without your permission. But if you force me to choose between my business and your reputation, you're going to lose that battle decisively. Marcus stepped back, apparently recognizing something in Victoria's voice that warned him against further escalation. After 18 years of marriage, he should have known that Victoria never made threats she wasn't prepared to follow through on. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is. It's been over since the moment you decided Grace was worth more to you than our marriage. Everything since then has just been cleanup. Victoria walked into her office building without looking back, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Marcus was escalating exactly as Margaret had predicted, moving from emotional manipulation to professional threats when his preferred tactics failed. Jennifer was waiting with coffee and concerned questions about the parking lot confrontation. Victoria briefed her on Marcus's threats while Jennifer took notes with the thoroughness of someone planning counter-strategy. "We need to get ahead of this," Jennifer said. "If Marcus is going to spread rumors or try to damage client relationships, we should contact our key accounts first." "Agreed. I'll draft a brief professional statement about the divorce that emphasizes business continuity and stability. We can send it to major clients as a preemptive measure." Victoria spent the morning crafting carefully worded communications that acknowledged her personal situation without providing ammunition for gossip or speculation. The messages emphasized Caldwell Marketing's strong financial position, experienced team, and commitment to client service regardless of ownership changes. At noon, Margaret called with updates on the divorce proceedings. Marcus's attorney had requested a meeting to discuss amicable settlement terms, which Margaret interpreted as recognition that Marcus's position was weaker than he'd initially calculated. They're probably realizing that the affair evidence eliminates most of their negotiating leverage, Margaret explained. Public infidelity makes it very difficult to argue for spousal support or favorable asset division. What kind of settlement are they likely to propose? Something that allows Marcus to save face while giving you most of what you want. Probably a quick divorce with minimal alimony in exchange for confidentiality agreements about the affair details. Victoria considered the offer's potential appeal. A confidential settlement would protect her privacy and prevent further public discussion of Marcus's betrayal. But it would also allow Marcus and Grace to escape accountability for their choices. "I want to think about it," Victoria said finally. "Part of me wants this to be over quickly and quietly, but another part of me thinks they should face consequences for the damage they've caused. Take your time deciding. We don't have to respond immediately." That afternoon, Victoria received an unexpected visitor. Grace Sullivan appeared in her office lobby, looking nervous and desperate. Jennifer intercepted her before she could request a meeting with Victoria, but Victoria decided to see what Grace had to say. They met in the conference room with Jennifer present as a witness. Grace had clearly been crying, her usual polished appearance replaced by smeared makeup and wrinkled clothes. "Mrs. Caldwell, I know you probably hate me, but I need you to understand that I never meant for any of this to happen," Grace began, her voice shaking. "What did you think was going to happen when you started sleeping with my husband?" Victoria asked calmly. I don't know what I thought. Marcus said you two were having problems, that your marriage was basically over anyway. He made it sound like I was helping him through a difficult time." Victoria felt disgust at the familiar pattern of Marcus's manipulation. He'd convinced Grace that their marriage was already failing, positioning himself as a victim rather than a predator pursuing a younger woman. "Grace, did it occur to you to verify Marcus's claims about our marriage problems by asking me directly?" No, I trusted him. He seemed so unhappy, so lonely. He seemed lonely because he was lying to everyone who cared about him, including you." Victoria studied Grace's face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus self-pity. "What do you want from me now? I want you to talk to Dylan. Tell him that I made a mistake, but that I love him and Emma. Tell him that our family's worth saving." The request was breathtaking in its audacity. Grace wanted Victoria to advocate for the marriage that Grace herself had destroyed through months of deliberate deception. "Why would I do that? Because Emma needs her parents together. Because Dylan is a good man who deserves happiness. Because one mistake shouldn't destroy a whole family?" Jennifer leaned forward. "Grace, you realize that you're asking the woman whose husband you stole to convince your husband to forgive you for stealing him." "I didn't steal anyone," Marcus pursued me. "He told me he was going to leave Victoria anyway. He said they were just staying together for appearances." More lies from Marcus, designed to ease Grace's conscience while he manipulated her into an affair. Victoria wondered how many other falsehoods he'd told to justify their relationship. "Grace, let me ask you something honestly. Did you know that Dylan was planning to surprise you with a vacation to Hawaii for your birthday next month? He asked me for restaurant recommendations in Maui." Grace's face crumpled. What? While you were texting Marcus about how clueless Dylan was, He was planning a romantic getaway to celebrate your marriage. While you were laughing about fooling your naive husband, he was trying to reconnect with a wife he thought was stressed from work. The weight of her betrayal seemed to hit Grace fully for the first time. Dylan hadn't been a distracted husband taking her for granted. He'd been a loving partner trying to nurture their relationship while she actively worked to destroy it. "I can't fix this for you," Victoria continued. "You made choices that have consequences. Dylan deserves better than a wife who lies to his face while planning to leave him. Emma deserves better than a mother who uses her as cover for an affair. I never involved Emma in any of this. You involved Emma the moment you decided to risk her family's stability for your own gratification. You involved her when you met Marcus in hotel rooms while she was at daycare. You involved her when you planned to destroy her father's life." Grace left the office in tears, but Victoria felt no satisfaction in her distress. There was something tragic about watching someone realize the full extent of damage they'd caused through selfishness and poor judgment. "Do you think she'll try to reconcile with Dylan?" Jennifer asked after Grace departed. "I think she'll try everything she can think of before accepting that some damage is irreversible." Victoria gathered the files from their afternoon meetings. But Dylan's attorney is documenting all contact attempts. Grace's desperation is actually helping his custody case. That evening, Victoria sat in her newly secured home, reviewing the day's events and planning for tomorrow's challenges. Marcus's threats had revealed his willingness to weaponize their shared professional connections against her business. Grace's visit had demonstrated her fundamental inability to accept responsibility for her choices. Both of them were still operating from the assumption that their betrayed spouses would eventually capitulate for the sake of avoiding further conflict and embarrassment. They couldn't accept that some violations of trust were too fundamental to overcome. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. "Grace showed up at Emma's school today, trying to pick her up without authorization. The teachers called me immediately. My attorney says this helps our case, but it scared Emma terribly." Victoria replied immediately with support and encouragement, but she felt anger building at Grace's increasingly desperate attempts to control the situation. Using a 6-year-old as leverage in adult conflicts was exactly the kind of behavior that family courts were designed to prevent. Margaret had warned that divorce proceedings often brought out the worst in people who felt cornered and desperate. Marcus and Grace were demonstrating that prediction with devastating accuracy. But Victoria was no longer the trusting wife who'd believed her husband's lies about Saturday morning meetings. She was now a woman who'd learned to recognize manipulation and protect herself from it. And tomorrow, she would continue building the life she deserved with people who understood the value of honesty and loyalty. Some lessons, she realized, could only be learned through betrayal. But once learned, they provided clarity that was worth the pain of acquiring it. Thursday morning brought news that changed everything. Victoria was reviewing client contracts when Margaret called with an urgent update about the divorce proceedings. "Victoria, we need to meet immediately. There's been a significant development in your case." "What kind of development? I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you come to my office within the hour?" The gravity in Margaret's voice made Victoria's stomach clench. She cleared her schedule and drove to the law office, mentally preparing for whatever crisis Marcus had manufactured overnight. Margaret was waiting with a stack of legal documents and an expression that mixed satisfaction with concern. "Grace Sullivan is pregnant," Margaret announced without preamble. Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. "Pregnant. She filed paperwork yesterday claiming that Marcus is the father and requesting financial support. Her attorney is trying to use the pregnancy to leverage a more favorable settlement in Dylan's custody case." The implications crashed over Victoria like cold water. Grace wasn't just Marcus's affair partner. She was potentially the mother of his child. The betrayal had consequences that would extend far beyond divorce proceedings and custody battles. "How far along is she?" "According to the medical documentation, approximately 12 weeks, which means the pregnancy began right around the time their affair started." Victoria calculated quickly. 12 weeks ago was early summer, when Marcus had begun his pattern of Saturday morning meetings and unexplained absences. Grace had been sleeping with both her husband and Victoria's husband simultaneously, without either man knowing about the other relationship. "What does this mean for my divorce? It complicates things significantly. If Marcus is the father, he'll have child support obligations that affect his financial position. It also provides additional evidence of the affair's duration and seriousness." Victoria sat in stunned silence, processing the information. Grace wasn't just a woman who'd made a poor decision about an affair. She was someone who'd risked pregnancy with her lover while married to another man. The level of deception was staggering. Does Dylan know? His attorney was notified this morning. Apparently, Dylan suspected something when Grace started experiencing morning sickness, but claimed it was food poisoning. Margaret consulted her notes. The timing makes it impossible for Dylan to be the father. Since he was traveling for work during the conception window, Victoria thought about Emma, who would now potentially have a half-sibling born from her mother's affair. The 6-year-old was already struggling with her parents' separation, and this development would add layers of complexity that no child should have to navigate. What happens next? Paternity testing, once the baby is born. Until then, Grace's financial situation becomes more precarious, and Dylan's custody case becomes stronger. Courts don't look favorably on mothers who engage in affairs that result in pregnancy while married to someone else. Victoria left Margaret's office feeling overwhelmed by the escalating complexity of what had started as a straightforward case of marital infidelity. Grace's pregnancy transformed the situation from a personal betrayal into a multi-generational crisis affecting children who'd had no voice in their parents' decisions. At her office, Jennifer was waiting with coffee and concerned questions about the emergency legal meeting. Grace is pregnant with Marcus's baby, Victoria said without preamble. Jennifer's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor, just as Victoria's champagne glass had done at the baby shower. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. Jesus Christ, Jennifer breathed. How is Dylan handling this? I don't know yet. Margaret says his attorney was just notified this morning. And Marcus, does he know? I assume so, since Grace's attorney is demanding financial support. Though knowing Marcus, he's probably trying to deny paternity until forced to admit it. Victoria's phone rang, displaying Dylan's number. She answered immediately, bracing herself for his emotional state. Victoria, I don't know what I need. Dylan's voice was hollow, drained of all energy. Did you hear about Grace's pregnancy? Yes, my attorney just told me. How are you doing? I keep thinking about all the times she claimed to have stomach flu, or said she was too tired for dinner, or couldn't drink wine because she was taking antibiotics. She was having pregnancy symptoms from another man's baby while I was taking care of her. The betrayal's depth was almost incomprehensible. Grace had allowed Dylan to nurture and support her through early pregnancy symptoms, letting him believe he was caring for his sick wife while she carried another man's child. Dylan, I'm so sorry. This is beyond anything reasonable people should have to endure. My attorney says it actually helps our custody case significantly. Courts really don't like parents who have affairs that result in pregnancy while married to someone else. But that doesn't make it easier to explain to Emma that mommy's having a baby with the man who used to be daddy's best friend. Victoria felt rage building at Marcus and Grace's selfishness. Their affair had been destructive enough when it was just about adult relationships. Adding a pregnancy meant their choices would affect children for decades. What do you need from me right now? Honestly, I need to know that I'm not crazy for refusing to forgive this. Grace's mother called me this morning, crying about how Grace made one mistake and how I should consider reconciliation for Emma's sake. Dylan, Grace didn't make one mistake. She made hundreds of deliberate choices over months while looking you in the eye and lying about all of them. And now she's pregnant with another man's baby. That's not a mistake. That's a complete betrayal of everything marriage is supposed to represent. Thank you. I needed to hear that from someone who understands what we're dealing with. The conversation ended with mutual support and promises to stay in touch. Victoria realized that her friendship with Dylan was becoming one of the most honest relationships in her life, built on shared experience of betrayal and mutual commitment to rebuilding with integrity. Friday brought another crisis. Victoria arrived at work to find 3 client cancellation notices in her email, all from accounts that Marcus had met through business dinners and social events. The messages were polite but vague, citing changes in marketing needs rather than stating real reasons for terminating their contracts. Jennifer reviewed the cancellations with growing anger. This has Marcus's fingerprints all over it. He's spreading rumors or applying pressure to damage your client base. Can we prove it? Not directly, but the timing is too coincidental. 3 major clients don't suddenly decide to change marketing firms in the same week unless someone's influencing their decisions. Victoria felt cold fury at Marcus's willingness to sabotage her business out of spite for her refusing reconciliation. He was demonstrating exactly the kind of character that had made divorce necessary in the first place. Call Margaret. I want to know what legal options we have for stopping this harassment. While Jennifer contacted their attorney, Victoria reviewed the canceled contracts and calculated the financial impact. Losing 3 major clients would hurt, but wouldn't devastate the business. Caldwell Marketing had diverse revenue streams and strong relationships with other accounts. More importantly, Victoria realized that any clients willing to terminate their contracts based on Marcus's influence weren't the kind of business partners she wanted long-term. Companies that made marketing decisions based on personal gossip rather than professional results would eventually become problematic in other ways. Margaret called back within an hour with legal options and strategic advice. We can't prove Marcus is interfering with your business relationships, but we can document the pattern and include it in the divorce proceedings. Margaret explained, professional sabotage during divorce proceedings reflects very badly on his character and credibility. What about criminal charges, intentional interference with business relationships? Difficult to prove without recorded conversations or written evidence. But the pattern strengthens our position significantly if this goes to trial rather than settlement. Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. I want this to go to trial. I want Marcus's behavior documented in public proceedings. I want Grace's pregnancy and the affair timeline part of the official record. Are you sure trials are expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining? Settlement negotiations could resolve everything more quickly and quietly. I'm sure Marcus thinks he can manipulate and pressure me into accepting his terms to avoid public embarrassment. He needs to learn that his actions have consequences that can't be managed through charm and legal maneuvering. That evening, Victoria sat in her garden reviewing the week's developments and planning for the legal battle ahead. Grace's pregnancy had transformed a straightforward divorce into a complex case involving multiple families and children. Marcus's business interference had revealed his willingness to weaponize their shared professional connections. But Victoria felt stronger rather than weaker as the situation escalated. Each of Marcus's manipulative tactics confirmed that divorce was the right decision. Each of Grace's desperate attempts to avoid consequences demonstrated her fundamental inability to accept responsibility for her choices. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Helen Caldwell. I heard about the pregnancy. I'm more ashamed of Marcus than I thought possible. My offer to testify on your behalf stands stronger than ever. Even Marcus's own mother recognized that his behavior had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Helen's support meant that Victoria wouldn't be fighting alone against Marcus's legal resources and professional connections. Victoria poured herself a glass of wine and watched the sunset paint her garden in golden light. The white roses from Rebecca's baby shower had been replaced with late summer blooms that she'd chosen herself. Vibrant colors that reflected her emerging independence rather than social expectations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Marcus and Grace realized that their betrayed spouses weren't going to quietly accept whatever settlement terms were convenient for the cheating couple, but Victoria was ready for those challenges. She'd learned that some battles were worth fighting, not for revenge but for justice, and some people needed to face consequences for their choices, especially when those choices affected innocent children who deserved better from the adults responsible for their welfare. Marcus and Grace had started this conflict when they chose betrayal over honesty. Now they would learn that their victims were stronger than they'd calculated and more determined than they'd expected. The war was just beginning, but Victoria was no longer fighting defensively. She was fighting to win. 6 weeks into the divorce proceedings, Victoria's life had settled into a new rhythm of legal meetings, business rebuilding, and unexpected discoveries about her own strength. She sat in Margaret's office on a crisp October morning, reviewing the latest developments in what had become one of the city's most talked about divorce cases. Marcus's attorney has made another settlement offer, Margaret announced, sliding a document across her desk. They're getting desperate. Victoria scanned the proposal, noting the increasingly favorable terms. Marcus was now offering to waive any claim to spousal support, accept minimal asset division, and agree to a rapid divorce timeline in exchange for confidentiality agreements about the affair details. He's realized that going to trial means public testimony about Grace's pregnancy and his business interference, Victoria observed. Exactly. His law firm is also applying pressure. Having a partner's messy divorce proceedings covered in local media isn't good for their corporate image. Victoria thought about the offer carefully. Accepting would end the legal battle quickly and privately, allowing everyone to rebuild their lives without continued public scrutiny, but it would also allow Marcus and Grace to escape meaningful accountability for their choices. What does Dylan think about confidentiality agreements? His attorney says Dylan prefers public proceedings. Grace's pregnancy has become crucial evidence in his custody case, and confidential settlements might limit his ability to present evidence about her pattern of deception. The interconnected nature of their cases meant that Victoria's decisions affected Dylan's legal strategy and vice versa. They were allies not just in emotional support, but in practical legal warfare against their former spouses. I want to think about it over the weekend, Victoria decided. This affects more than just my situation. That afternoon, Victoria met Dylan for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. He looked healthier than he had weeks earlier, with some of the color returning to his face and a sense of purpose replacing the shell-shocked confusion that had followed the baby shower revelations. "How's Emma adjusting?" Victoria asked. "Better than I expected. Actually, the child therapist says kids are remarkably resilient when they have one stable parent providing consistent support." Dylan stirred sugar into his coffee thoughtfully. "Emma's starting to understand that Mommy made choices that hurt our family, but that doesn't mean she's a bad person or that Emma did anything wrong. That's healthy perspective for a 6-year-old. The therapist is amazing. She's helping Emma process the pregnancy news too, which I was dreading. Turns out kids can handle complex truths better than adults sometimes." Victoria admired Dylan's commitment to protecting Emma's emotional well-being while being honest about their family's new reality. It was exactly the kind of principled parenting that Marcus and Grace had abandoned in pursuit of their own desires. "Grace tried to contact me again yesterday," Dylan continued, "through her mother this time, requesting a meeting to discuss co-parenting arrangements." "What did you tell them?" "That all communication goes through attorneys until custody agreements are finalized. Grace forfeited the right to informal negotiations when she chose to have an affair that resulted in pregnancy." Dylan's firmness impressed Victoria. He'd transformed from a trusting husband who made excuses for suspicious behavior into a protective father who refused to enable further manipulation. "She's getting more desperate as the pregnancy progresses," Dylan observed. "Apparently, Marcus isn't as supportive as she expected him to be." Victoria wasn't surprised. Marcus excelled at pursuit and seduction, but had always struggled with responsibility and commitment. The reality of child support obligations and complex family dynamics was probably overwhelming his desire for Grace. "My attorney says Grace's financial situation is becoming precarious," Dylan continued. "She can't work much longer as a waitress. Marcus isn't providing the support she expected, and her family doesn't have resources to help with legal fees." The conversation touched on Marcus's latest settlement offer and its potential implications for both their cases. Dylan was adamant about maintaining public proceedings that would document Grace's deception and protect his custody rights. "I need the court record to show exactly what kind of person Grace is," Dylan explained. "Not for revenge, but for Emma's protection. If Grace continues making poor decisions, I want documented evidence of her pattern of behavior." Victoria understood his reasoning completely. They weren't fighting for punishment, but for protection of their children, their futures, and their ability to make decisions based on truth rather than manipulation. Sunday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Helen Caldwell appeared at Victoria's door carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing an expression of determined resolve. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, dear, but I have something important to discuss." They settled in Victoria's living room, where Helen had attended countless family gatherings over the years. The familiar setting made their conversation feel both intimate and surreal. "I've been thinking about Marcus's settlement offers and what they represent," Helen began. "He's trying to buy his way out of accountability, and I think that's wrong. It would certainly end the legal proceedings more quickly, but it wouldn't address the fundamental issue of character. Marcus has spent his entire life believing that charm and money can fix any problem he creates. This divorce is his opportunity to learn that some consequences can't be avoided." Helen's perspective surprised Victoria with its moral clarity. She'd expected Marcus's mother to advocate for family privacy and minimal conflict, not for accountability and consequences. What are you suggesting? I think you should reject the settlement and proceed to trial. Not for revenge, but for education. Marcus needs to face the full consequences of his choices, and Grace needs to understand that actions have lasting repercussions. Helen paused, choosing her words carefully. I've also decided to establish a trust fund for Emma Sullivan's education and future needs. That little girl is an innocent victim of her parents' selfishness, and she deserves support from adults who understand right from wrong. The gesture was both generous and pointed. Helen was essentially disinheriting her own son while providing for the child damaged by his affair. It was a moral statement that transcended family loyalty in favor of ethical principles. Mrs. Caldwell, that's incredibly generous, but you don't need to. Yes, I do. I helped raise Marcus to be the kind of man who would betray his wife and best friend. I bear some responsibility for his character failures, and I want to do something positive to address the damage he's caused. Monday morning brought Victoria's decision to Margaret's office. After weighing all the factors, legal strategy, emotional resolution, implications for Dylan's case, and her own values about accountability, Victoria chose to reject Marcus's settlement offer and proceed to trial. I want the full truth on public record, Victoria announced. I want Marcus and Grace to face the consequences of their choices in open court. And I want other families to understand that this kind of betrayal doesn't have to be accepted quietly. Margaret nodded approvingly. It's the harder path, but sometimes the harder path leads to better outcomes. Are you prepared for the media attention and public scrutiny? I'm prepared for whatever comes. Marcus and Grace chose to conduct their affair in public spaces, using family events and social gatherings as cover for their deception. If they wanted privacy, they should have considered that before destroying two families. That afternoon, Victoria called Dylan to inform him of her decision. His relief was audible through the phone. Thank you. I know trial proceedings will be difficult for everyone, but Emma needs to see that adults who make destructive choices face real consequences. We're in this together now, Victoria replied. Whatever happens in court, we're fighting for the same principles: honesty, accountability, and protection for the innocent people who got hurt. As Victoria prepared for the legal battle ahead, she reflected on how much her perspective had changed since the baby shower that had exposed Marcus's betrayal. She'd started that day as a trusting wife who believed in the power of fixing broken relationships. She was ending this phase as a strategic woman who understood that some damage was too fundamental to repair. Marcus and Grace had gambled that their betrayed spouses would eventually prioritize social comfort over personal integrity. They'd assumed that Victoria and Dylan would accept whatever settlement terms avoided public embarrassment and family disruption. They'd miscalculated completely. Victoria was no longer fighting to save her marriage or protect Marcus's reputation. She was fighting to establish principles that would guide her future relationships and protect other families from similar betrayals. The trial would be painful, expensive, and emotionally draining, but it would also be honest, thorough, and ultimately just injustice. Victoria had learned was worth fighting for even when forgiveness felt easier. 1 year later, Victoria stood in the same garden where she'd once planned Rebecca's baby shower, but everything had changed. The October sunlight filtered through trees showing their first autumn colors, and the space reflected her new life. Simpler, more authentic, designed for one person's happiness rather than social expectations. The trial had ended 8 months ago with a decisive victory that surprised no one who'd followed the proceedings. Marcus's attempts to minimize his culpability had crumbled under cross-examination. While Grace's testimony about the affair's timeline had destroyed any remaining credibility she might have claimed, the divorce settlement had been swift and unambiguous. Victoria retained the house, her business, and her financial independence. Marcus received minimal assets and no spousal support, his lawyer career damaged by the public revelation of his affair and business interference tactics. More importantly, Dylan had won primary custody of Emma with only supervised visitation rights for Grace. The court had been particularly critical of Grace's deception about the pregnancy timeline and her attempts to manipulate parenting arrangements for her own benefit. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Client meeting went perfectly. The Henderson account is officially ours. Celebration drinks tonight. Caldwell Marketing had not only survived the crisis, but had actually grown stronger. The clients who'd left because of Marcus's influence had been replaced by companies that valued Victoria's integrity and professional competence over social connections. The business had also attracted new accounts specifically because Victoria's principled handling of her personal crisis had impressed potential partners. Jennifer had been promoted to full partner, and they'd hired 2 additional employees to handle their expanding client base. Victoria had learned that success built on genuine competence was more sustainable than success built on social networking and convenient marriages. Dylan appeared at her back gate carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a smile that had become increasingly frequent over the past few months. Their friendship had deepened through shared crisis into something neither of them had expected, a romantic relationship built on mutual respect, shared values, and complete honesty about their past experiences. "How did Emma's soccer game go?" Victoria asked, accepting his kiss and the champagne. "2 goals and 1 assist. She's becoming quite the athlete." Dylan's pride in his daughter was evident in every word. "She asked if you're coming to her school play next Friday." "Wouldn't miss it." "What's the production?" "Something about friendship and loyalty conquering evil." "Very appropriate, considering our family history." They'd been careful to introduce Victoria into Emma's life gradually, with professional guidance from the child therapist who'd helped her process her parents' divorce. Emma had responded positively to Victoria's presence, especially after realizing that Victoria understood what it felt like to be betrayed by people who were supposed to be trustworthy. Grace had given birth to a son 5 months earlier. Paternity testing had confirmed Marcus as the father, but their relationship had deteriorated rapidly under the stress of legal proceedings, financial pressure, and the reality of co-parenting with someone they barely knew outside the context of their affair. Grace now worked part-time at a different restaurant while trying to manage single motherhood and limited custody arrangements with Emma. Marcus paid court-ordered child support, but showed little interest in developing a meaningful relationship with his son. Helen Caldwell had established the Promise Trust Fund for Emma's future and had become an unexpected source of wisdom and support for both Victoria and Dylan. She visited regularly, bringing gifts for Emma and offering perspective on building families based on choice rather than obligation. "I have news," Dylan announced, settling beside Victoria on her garden bench. "Grace's attorney contacted mine today. She wants to discuss increasing my custody time with Emma." Really, what changed? Apparently, managing a new baby while working and trying to maintain a social life is more difficult than she anticipated. She's requesting additional childcare help, which means more time with me. Victoria felt mixed emotions about the development. Emma would benefit from increased stability and time with Dylan, but Grace's willingness to surrender parenting time suggested continued poor judgment about priorities. "How does Emma feel about it?" "She's excited. She loves her little brother when she visits, but she's also mentioned feeling more comfortable and secure here." Dylan paused thoughtfully. "The therapist says Emma has processed the divorce much better than expected because she has one parent providing complete consistency and honesty." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint Victoria's garden in golden light. The space that had once hosted elaborate social events now served as a peaceful retreat from the complexity of rebuilding their lives. Victoria's phone rang, displaying Rebecca's number. Her sister had given birth to a healthy son 3 months after the infamous baby shower, and their relationship had grown stronger through the crisis. Rebecca had become one of Victoria's most valued advisors about navigating single life and pursuing authentic happiness. "Victoria, are you free for dinner Sunday? Thomas is making his famous lasagna, and the baby is finally sleeping through the night." "I'd love that. Can I bring Dylan and Emma?" Of course, Emma can help entertain little James while the adults catch up. The casual invitation represented something Victoria had lost during her marriage to Marcus and regained through divorce: genuine relationships based on mutual affection rather than social obligation. Rebecca included Dylan and Emma naturally, recognizing them as Victoria's chosen family rather than requiring formal introductions and approval processes. After ending the call, Victoria reflected on the unexpected path that had led her to this moment. A year ago, she'd been a married CEO who believed her life was settled and successful. The baby shower betrayal had shattered that illusion, but had also created opportunities for growth and authentic relationships that she couldn't have imagined. "Do you ever regret how everything happened?" Dylan asked quietly. Victoria considered the question seriously. I regret the pain that Emma experienced. I regret that Marcus and Grace chose betrayal over honesty, but I don't regret learning the truth about who they really were. Even though it was so public and humiliating, especially because it was public, the witnesses prevented Marcus and Grace from rewriting history or minimizing their choices. They had to face the full consequences of their actions. Dylan nodded, understanding her reasoning completely. Emma asked me yesterday if people who break promises ever learn to keep them. What did you tell her? That some people learn from their mistakes and become better, while others keep making the same poor decisions because they never accept responsibility for the consequences. It was exactly the kind of honest, age-appropriate wisdom that Emma needed to navigate her complex family situation. Dylan had become an exceptional single father, providing stability and moral guidance without destroying Emma's relationship with her mother entirely. As evening shadows lengthened across the garden, Victoria felt profound gratitude for the unexpected gifts that had emerged from betrayal and crisis. Her business was stronger, her friendships were deeper, her family relationships were more authentic, and her romantic partnership was built on mutual respect rather than convenience and social expectations. Marcus and Grace had destroyed two families in pursuit of immediate gratification, but their selfishness had also created opportunities for better relationships to emerge from the wreckage. Victoria and Dylan had both learned to recognize genuine compatibility and shared values rather than accepting relationships based on familiarity and social convenience. I love you, Dylan said simply, taking her hand as the first stars appeared overhead. I love you too, Victoria replied, meaning it completely. The words carried weight and commitment that her marriage vows to Marcus had never possessed. They were spoken by people who understood the cost of betrayal and had chosen honesty even when it was difficult. Victoria's garden, which had once hosted a celebration that ended in public humiliation, now served as the foundation for a new life built on integrity and authentic connection. The roses that had decorated Rebecca's baby shower had been replaced by plants that Victoria had chosen herself. Hardy perennials that would bloom year after year with proper care and attention. Some endings, Victoria had learned, were actually beginnings in disguise, and some betrayals, as painful as they were to endure, cleared the way for relationships that were worth building and protecting. The baby shower that had exposed Marcus's affair felt like ancient history now, a necessary crisis that had forced everyone involved to confront truth rather than maintaining comfortable illusions. Victoria squeezed Dylan's hand and watched the stars emerge overhead, grateful for every difficult choice that had led her to this moment of genuine peace and authentic love. The champagne glass that had shattered in her kitchen a year ago had been replaced by something much more valuable, the unshakable knowledge that she was capable of surviving betrayal and building a life worthy of the person she'd become through the process. And that knowledge, Victoria realized, was worth more than any marriage built on lies or any social status purchased through compromise and convenient silence. Some storms, she'd learned, cleared the air for better weather, and some betrayals, as devastating as they felt in the moment, created space for relationships that were strong enough to last. If this story hooked you as much as it hooked me, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think Victoria should do next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because stories this wild don't come around every day, and you won't want to miss what happens when the courtroom doors open and the real battle begins.